All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Clawson. I'm one of the senior sales engineers specializing in security here at Sumo Logic. Welcome to today's session where we're going to be talking about building your modern SIEM and going into what are some of the unique security and requirements for a cloud and modern SIEM. So thank you for joining us. So I wanted to start this session with the SIEM joke, but I'm still tuning it. But so for those of you in the trenches or who have been in the trenches of the SIEM world or maybe SOC analysts, you'll know that that joke kind of resonates in a bad way. Why is that? And I think it's for good reason. SIEM has traditionally earned itself a bad reputation as an unwieldy and unmanageable tool that really never lived up to its promises. So today we're going to be talking about what Sumo Logic is doing to modernize log analytics and SIEM in general. So when you do industry surveys with different enterprise or customers, you typically see that security in today's modern age looks bleak. What's interesting is that despite overall technology is accelerating and the digital transformation is taking place at a very rapid pace, security always seems to lag behind. When you hear things like 50% of alerts are untriaged or unnoticed by security teams, or it takes 206 days on average to identify a breach, it's pretty scary. So what exactly is the problem? And I think you have to understand the problem first to really drive to a solution. So I've broken down this problem into three areas, which we're going to unpack a little bit as we go here. So first up, nobody could have foreseen the explosion of machine data that we're witnessing today as technology weaves itself into our businesses and actually just into our lives. There's the volume of data is just explosive. So we're trying to figure out how to deal with that. Second, with all of this new technology, of course, there's always adversaries and those out there who wish to exploit the new technology, find vulnerabilities for their own gain. So in response, as defenders, what we've done is we've created a whole new set of alerts and sensors and signals to kind of identify those indicators of compromise. The only issue is now we just have too many of those alerts. They're often false positive, and our analysts are struggling. They're really drowning in alerts. And a lot of times those alerts, they lack the context of the business and the risk overall. So even when they are legitimate, they don't understand the impact that that security event might have. And then lastly, we are going to talk about the human problem. So what does that mean? You're probably familiar with the huge skill shortage that there is in just technology or security in general, but it's only getting worse because the assets that we're demanding be monitored are increasing in sophistication. So just hiring a tier one analyst, they need to come to the table with a lot of new knowledge, information, knowledge about cloud, about modern applications, microservices, containerizations. All of these things are now really table stakes for a well-rounded analyst, and it's just hard to find those specialized skills. And then the tools that we're demanding that they use to monitor and secure enterprise environments is also becoming more complex. So it's it's very difficult in short, as you guys all know. So I love this quote. It says, um, and this is from executive director for the University College of London, the Big Data Institute. But he says, the rate at which we're generating data is rapidly outpacing our ability to analyze it. The trick is to turn these massive data streams from a liability into a strength. So that's where we're going to start this discussion. So let me show you a slide here. This I call the data collection law of diminishing returns, which really means the more you collect, the more expensive it becomes, and the less value you get from the data, or the more difficult it becomes to get value out of that data. So winding the clock back a little bit, 10 years ago, Sumo Logic started with a mission to bring traditional log analytics and SIEM into the world of SaaS and cloud computing. So since then, today, almost every major SIEM vendor or log analytics platform has recognized this truly is where the future lies in order to keep up with the log management. So you have to have this value-driven approach in order to keep, well, first of all, in order to justify the business expense. There's nobody has a bottomless checkbook, and when you're presenting them with, solutions that you would like to deploy, you have to have an underlying value proposition. So Sumo Logic, that's been kind of our driving force in leveraging this new cloud world in order to bring that to be. So it's easy to just draw a line on a graph and say, look, we win. We have the line that goes up and you have the line that goes down. But it's not really that simple. So I want to unpack this one a little bit further as well. So how can we claim that, and how does Sumo Logic do that? So two real ways. There's probably more than this, but I kind of wanted to distill it down to a couple key areas. So first of all, the Sumo Logic mission statement is to democratize data. What does that even mean? So you guys are paying to collect huge amounts of data, and you're going to be paying more, unfortunately, to collect this data, because the data growth is not going to stop anytime soon. So what we need to do is make sure that this data store that you're paying to bring in is cross-functional, meaning that the different people within your organization, all of the different system owners and the stakeholders, have easy access to this data, because the more people that are using this data, that are getting intelligence out of this data, then the more valuable it becomes. Make sure that the data is always hot, meaning you don't have to rehydrate the data or bring it out of cold storage. It just needs to be there. Retrieval time needs to be short. If you have to go get a cup of coffee as you're waiting for your query to run, that's not going to fly. People will just stop using the platform. And then lastly, you shouldn't have to be a data scientist to use the tool. It needs to be intuitive. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, what it means to democratize data. You get everybody singing off the same music, everybody looking at the same data store or data lake to get their insights. Secondly, we have the disruptive price model that we bring to the table. So not all data is created equal, meaning you shouldn't have to pay the same for debug logs as compliance logs, as security logs, as operational logs. We need to be flexible with you in the way that it's stored, whether it be allowing you to just use credits for the different data types, or maybe store it differently at a much different price point. Some of it needs to be real time. Some of it needs to only be searchable occasionally. So you shouldn't be paying the same for all of that data. And then, as we, of course, are leveraging the economies of scale that come with cloud, we need to pass those savings on to you. The end goal, really, from a business perspective, is to move from that CapEx model where you're buying hardware and deploying hardware and working refresh cycles and all of that, to an OpEx, which is generally more an efficient way to operate. So I like this humorous depiction of how things were yesterday. In the black and white side, you can see there, with how things are today with cloud workloads. So as you guys are looking to improve your SIEM or modernize your SIEM, certainly this would be table stakes. Does it leverage all of these new modern cloud technologies? So moving on from the data collection problem, we have the alerting problem. So with alerting, there's a lot here going on. As you guys are modernizing your applications and your infrastructure to cloud and containers and microservices, all of the modern app stack, does your SIEM also keep pace with those changes? So out of the box, you need to have content that supports all of the major cloud service providers. Amazon Web, Google Cloud, Microsoft Azure, etc. But beyond that, even within, each one of those has dozens of services or features that they provide. Um, is there out of the box content to leverage all of those, part of your DevSecOps or your modern application tool set? Is there out of the box content to cover that as well? So that's some areas that you definitely need to look into. I always recommend, reviewing the app catalog. First of all, is there an app catalog? How robust is it? Does it grow? Are they continuing to update it, etc.? So moving on there, one thing that's often overlooked is network traffic analytics, sometimes referred to as NTA. There's huge insights that can be gleaned from monitoring traffic between systems on the wire or in the cloud beyond just your typical logs, your system logs or your firewall logs. So that's something that I really push for when in most of my deployments, because it gives you a completely new vantage point or visibility. We leverage the open source Zeek platform, by the way, or sometimes Corelight is kind of the parent of that project. Lastly, one thing that's worth talking about is, does the solution leverage intelligence that can only be gleaned from cloud solutions, that global intelligence? I love CrowdStrike's approach, and they've been kind of a disruptor in their market. But being able to bubble up all the information across the globe into a central aggregate or multi-tenant solution in order to provide that value back down the chain. So we at Sumo Logic, we saw a good fit. We partner with them, and you get CrowdStrike threat intelligence out of the box at no extra cost, which is pretty cool. But we also have our own global intelligence. So we've got thousands of customers. We've seen alerts across thousands of customers, and we can provide back to you, how does your security posture look compared to everyone else? Are the threats that you're seeing rare? So that kind of covers the modern alerting. There's a lot. I mean, each one of these is a session in itself, but we don't have that kind of time. But definitely keep all of these in mind as you're reviewing and modernizing your solutions. But even if you succeed there and you modernize your alerting, you're still left with a serious problem, which is that alert fatigue. Having been a SOC consultant in the trenches 24/7 and an analyst, I know the pain, and it is not pleasant, and it truly does cause analyst burnout and swivel chair syndromes. All of these IT diseases that we talk about are very real. So what do we do? That's the question. This quote from Bill, he's the former deputy director at the NSA. We affectionately call it no such agency. I may or may not have been employed there previously. But he says, cyber defense is about having an integrated set of tools that work together to prevent attacks, but the industry now has 1,000 points of light and no illumination. So that's pretty powerful. We really do need to completely rethink our approach to correlation and alerting. This is not sustainable. Where we used to be looking for that needle in a haystack, we're now looking for a needle in a needle stack, and it's not easy. So what are we going to do? What does Sumo Logic do? I guess we'll start there. First thing, all alerting and signals have to be viewed in an entity-centric way. An entity in our world is either a user or maybe a system, but it has to be intelligent enough to be able to aggregate on the entity level. So that way, as an analyst, you can see here all of when you open up an alert, you're not seeing an individual point of light. You're seeing more of the broader picture of what's happening to this particular entity. What is this actor doing? What is this system doing in my environment? So that's the very first thing, which is probably the most powerful change that we do. But can we do more? What about taking an industry framework like the MITRE attack lifecycle and overlaying every single signal with what attack stage that it lies in? So this isn't all of the different attack stages. I kind of simplified it for you, but how powerful would that be for an analyst to be able to instantly see wow, here are all of the different signals and what stage they belong to, without having to query and without having to research. And then lastly, can we provide them with the attacker dwell time? So look back multiple weeks and just show me at a glance everything it knows about a system, all of the relevant security events. So if we put all of these things together, the entity-centric view, the attack, the MITRE attack framework on top of the timeline, the dwell time, what do we see? We call this an insight in our world. And you can see that the analyst here is, instead of dealing with a barrage of alerts, he's really dealing with just a few. So he's a happy camper. I would have killed for this, by the way, in my days. What does this actually look like? So we've done this. So this is the Sumo Logic CSE platform. Encourage you to see a full demo of this, but here you can see an insight, what we call an insight, which is a group of signals. We use adaptive signal clustering on an entity level, and we overlay in all of that enrichment information in a very dense way. So this is like one click in for an analyst, and they're presented with all of this information. So, excuse me, I like this quote as well. This is from one of our studies, but it says 75% of SecOp teams said they need to hire 3 or more analysts just to address all of the alerts that they get daily. So this brings us to our very last problem, the human problem, if you remember correctly. Lastly, as we said before, once everybody is looking at the same data store, you can get that force multiplier where all of the different team members are leveraging that same data and driving value out of it. It's not just the security tool. It's not just the operation tool. It's everybody's tool. So in summary, what have we got? So let's it's kind of like a three-legged stool. And as you guys are looking across, capabilities, I think you should kind of break it down into these 3 levels as well. But data solution, is it elastic? Is it cost effective? Is it true cloud SaaS? Are the alerts modernized, right? Do you have content that's really covering the visibility that you need in your modern app stack? And then lastly, how does it solve the human problem? Is it just going to be one more tool, one more source of alerts that you just don't have time to address and triage? It needs to be hyper efficient and hyper insightful. The fidelity of these alerts and insights needs to be incredible. So with that, I think that kind of puts a bow on it. Hopefully you guys kind of get where Sumo Logic is driving, how we're going to modernize your infrastructure and also the whole SIEM and log analytics solution. Certainly reach out to us if you'd like to see a deeper demo. We'd love to get under the hood with you and talk about some of the use cases that might fit your organization. If you guys have any questions, please put them in the chat, type them in, and we'll address those now. But thanks so much all for spending some time with us today.